The world pushes constantly. Pressure, noise, demand. An unarmored mind absorbs everything. It reacts. It fractures. It weakens. An armored mind does not harden. It stabilizes. It holds. It decides. This audiobook is about building that armor. Not through aggression. Through discipline. Control is not force. It is structure. When the mind is armored, pressure loses leverage. Focus holds. Emotion settles. An armored mind does not resist the world. It outlasts it. Most people absorb everything. They take in every comment, every message, every mood in the room. They call it awareness. They call it being informed. It is not. It is exposure without control. An unfiltered mind becomes unstable. Not because life is harsh. Because too much is allowed in. Not every stimulus deserves entry. That is where this begins. You are not weak for feeling overwhelmed. You are unguarded. Everything reaches you. Everything affects you. Everything pulls. That is not strength. That is vulnerability. You have a choice. You can continue absorbing by default. Or you can start refusing deliberately. Refusal is not avoidance. It is structure. Most people believe strength means enduring more, taking more, handling more. That belief is the flaw. It's not about endurance. It's about discipline. Discipline decides what enters. Discipline decides what stays out. When everything enters, nothing settles. Thoughts collide. Emotions overlap. Attention fractures. Instability follows. That's the key. Instability is often caused by access, not ability. You are letting too much in. Opinions you did not ask for. Problems that are not yours. Noise that adds no value. Each one leaves residue. You feel it as tension. As fatigue. As restlessness. The mind was not designed to absorb endlessly. It was designed to select. Selection requires refusal. You don't need their permission to refuse entry. You do not owe your attention to everything. You do not need to justify silence. Most people absorb because they fear missing something. Or disappointing someone. Or appearing disengaged. Those fears are expensive. Every time you absorb something unnecessary, you pay with clarity. Clarity is fragile without armor. Armor is not aggression. It is containment. Containment means limits. Clear ones. You start by noticing what you absorb automatically. The news you check without thinking. The conversations you stay in out of habit. The emotional tone you mirror without choosing. These are not neutral. They shape your internal state. When you absorb stress, you carry it. When you absorb urgency, you rush. When you absorb emotion, you lose distance. Distance is required for control. Stillness creates distance. Stillness allows you to notice the impulse to absorb, the reflex to check, the pull to engage. You pause there. That pause is armor. It's not about ignoring the world. It's about deciding how it reaches you. Most people confuse openness with strength. They believe being affected proves depth. It proves lack of filter. A disciplined mind is selective. It does not absorb blindly. It evaluates first. This is a trained behavior. At first, refusal feels uncomfortable. You will feel tension. You will feel the urge to re-engage. That urge is conditioning. You do not obey it. That's the key. Discomfort is not danger. Absorption feels easier because it avoids decision. Refusal requires authority. Authority must be practiced. You practice by reducing unnecessary inputs. You stop checking without purpose. You step out of conversations that drain. You limit exposure to emotional noise. This is not rudeness. It is regulation. Your nervous system stabilizes when inputs reduce. Stability restores judgment. Judgment restores control. Most emotional reactions come from overexposure. Too many signals. Too little space. Space is created by refusal. You have a choice. You can let the environment dictate your state. Or you can decide what is allowed to influence you. Influence is power. Whoever controls your input shapes your outputs. That is not philosophical. It is practical. When you absorb less, thinking sharpens. Emotion settles. Energy returns. Not because life changed. Because access changed. This chapter is about responsibility. Responsibility for what enters your mind. Not everything needs a response. Not everything needs attention. Not everything deserves space. Refusal protects capacity. Capacity allows depth. Depth produces results. Stillness supports refusal. In stillness, you notice what tries to enter. You see the impulse clearly. You choose. Choice requires pause. Pause is a skill. You do not rush to fill silence. You do not rush to react. You do not rush to engage. You wait. Waiting is not passive. It is strategic. It allows weak inputs to fall away on their own. Most noise cannot survive stillness. That's the key. What matters remains. What does not fades. Armor begins here. Not by hardening yourself. By narrowing access. You decide what shapes you. This is the foundation. Without it, nothing else holds. Focus collapses. Emotion overflows. Discipline breaks. With it, structure forms. You learn that not every stimulus deserves entry. You learned that absorption without filtering creates instability. You learned that armor begins with refusal. Now you must build what replaces absorption. Structure. Structure is what holds when pressure arrives. Without it, the mind collapses inward. Emotion spreads. Attention scatters. Decisions weaken. Most people do not lack intelligence. They lack internal structure. They operate on impulse. On mood. On urgency. That is not freedom. That is exposure. Structure is not rigidity. It is support. It gives the mind something to stand on when conditions shift. That's the key. Structure prevents emotional collapse. When there are no internal rules, everything becomes negotiable. Focus. Boundaries. Behavior. Negotiation drains energy. Every decision becomes heavier than it needs to be. You have a choice. You can continue deciding in the moment. Or you can build structure in advance. Most people wait until they feel overwhelmed to look for control. By then, it is too late. Structure must exist before pressure. Pressure does not build discipline. It exposes its absence. Internal structure means clear rules for how you operate. Not vague intentions. Not goals. Rules. Rules remove debate. When emotion rises, the rule remains. This is how control is maintained. Most emotional mistakes happen because people rely on feeling. They act when they feel ready. They stop when they feel resistance. Feeling is unreliable. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Discipline does not ask how you feel. It executes what was decided earlier. That is structure. Structure tells you when to engage. When to disengage. when to pause, when to act. Without structure, everything feels urgent. Urgency creates chaos. Stillness supports structure. In stillness, you see how often your mind wants to escape rules. You see the impulse to bend them. You see the desire for relief. You do not obey. You hold the line. That is training. Most people think structure limits freedom. They fear being boxed in. The opposite is true. Structure frees you from constant decision-making. It frees you from emotional bargaining. It frees you from regret. Regret comes from acting without structure. You don't need their permission to set internal rules. You do not need approval to enforce them. You do not need validation to hold your standards. Structure is internal authority. You define it. You enforce it. No one else can do this for you. Internal structure begins with a few clear decisions. What you respond to. What you ignore. How you behave under stress. How you treat your attention. These decisions must be simple. Complex rules break under pressure. Simple rules hold. For example, you do not respond when emotionally elevated. You pause first. You do not multitask during focused work. You finish one thing before starting another. You do not engage with unnecessary noise. You remove it. These are not preferences. They are rules. Rules create predictability. Predictability stabilizes the nervous system. When the system is stable, thinking improves. Most anxiety is not caused by events. It is caused by unpredictability inside the mind. Structure reduces that unpredictability. That's the key. Structure calms the system before emotion escalates. When structure is absent, emotion fills the gap. Emotion becomes the decision maker. That is when people say things they regret. That is when they react instead of respond. That is when control slips. Structure prevents this. It creates a default response. Default responses matter more than peak performance. Your worst moments shape outcomes more than your best ones. Structure protects you in those moments. You have a choice. You can rely on willpower. Or you can rely on structure. Willpower is inconsistent. Structure is stable. Stillness helps you see where structure is missing. In quiet moments, notice where you feel reactive. Notice where behavior changes based on mood. Notice where boundaries blur. Those are structural weaknesses. You do not fix them emotionally. You fix them operationally. You add rules. You define limits. You reduce options. Options create temptation. Structure removes temptation. That's the key. Remove the need to resist. Most people exhaust themselves trying to resist impulses. They try to be strong in the moment. Strength fades. Structure holds. Structure also creates identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who operates by rule. Not impulse. Not urgency. Identity reinforces behavior. Behavior reinforces identity. This loop stabilizes quickly. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop justifying exceptions. You act according to standard. Standards are the backbone of the armored mind. Without them, armor cracks under pressure. With them, pressure has nowhere to enter. Structure does not mean you never adapt. It means adaptation is deliberate. You change rules consciously, not emotionally. This preserves authority. Authority over yourself is the goal. An armored mind is not reactive. It is governed. Governed by structure. Maintained by discipline. Stillness keeps structure visible. When you slow down, you feel when rules are about to be broken. You sense the pull. You correct early. Correction early is calm. Correction late is forceful. Structure allows early correction. You do not wait for collapse. You adjust immediately. This is control in practice. You have a choice. You can continue letting emotion decide. Or you can install structure that holds regardless of feeling. One leads to instability. The other leads to consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your decisions. When you trust your internal structure, confidence stabilizes. You stop bracing for mistakes. You stop fearing pressure. Because you know how you will act. This chapter is about foundation. Armor without structure is decoration. It looks strong. It fails on impact. Structure is what makes armor functional. You learned that not every stimulus deserves entry. You learned that refusal protects stability. Now you understand what replaces absorption. Internal structure. Next, you must learn how to activate that structure in real time. Before words. Before action. Before reaction. Most damage happens before words are spoken. Before action. Before decision. It happens in the brief moment when emotion spikes and structure is not yet engaged. That moment decides everything. Regulation must come before response. Most people respond first. Then they regret. Then they explain. That order destroys control. You have a choice. You can continue letting emotion initiate behavior. Or you can regulate first. Regulation is not suppression. It is stabilization. Emotion is fast. Judgment is slower. If you act while emotion leads, judgment never arrives in time. That's the key. Speed favors emotion. Stillness favors control. Most people believe they need to express emotion to process it. They believe release equals relief. That belief is costly. Release without regulation reinforces reaction. Regulation creates space. Space allows structure to engage. Without regulation, structure collapses. You feel triggered. You feel urgency. You feel pressure to respond. That pressure is internal. It is not a command. You pause. This pause is not hesitation. It is leadership. Stillness is the first move. You slow the body before you move the mouth. You slow the breath before you move the hands. The body always reacts first. Heart rate rises. Breathing shortens. Muscles tighten. If the body is dysregulated, the mind follows. Regulate the body. The mind will stabilize. That's the key. Control begins physically. You take a slow breath. You lengthen the exhale. You relax the jaw. You drop the shoulders. This takes seconds. Those seconds change outcomes. Most people skip this step. They go straight to expression. Expression feels urgent. It feels justified. It is rarely wise. You don't need their permission to pause. You do not owe immediate response. You do not need to match intensity. Matching intensity is loss of control. Regulation breaks escalation. When you regulate first, emotion loses leverage. It is still present. But it no longer drives. This is not about being calm to appear calm. It is about maintaining authority. Authority requires distance. Distance comes from pause. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Discipline delays action until structure is online. Most people believe discipline is about forcing behavior. It is not. It is about timing. Right action at the wrong time is still wrong. Regulation ensures timing. You do not decide while elevated. You do not respond while activated. You wait until the system settles. This does not take long. Emotion peaks quickly. Then it fades. Reaction locks you into the peak. Regulation lets it pass. That's the key. You do not eliminate emotion. You outlast it. Practice starts in small moments. A critical comment. An unexpected message. A minor frustration. These are training grounds. You feel the surge. You pause. You regulate. You do nothing else. Not yet. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. The urge to act will push harder. That urge is conditioning. You do not obey. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you weaken the reflex. This is how regulation becomes automatic. Over time, something changes. The surge feels less overwhelming. The pause feels natural. Control returns faster. This is not personality. It is training. Most people blame temperament. They say they are just reactive. That is avoidance. You are trained to react. You can be trained to regulate. Stillness accelerates this training. When you regularly practice stillness, you recognize activation sooner. You catch emotion earlier. Before it spills into action. Early regulation is calm. Late regulation is forceful. You want early. You don't need their permission to regulate internally. You do not need external approval to control yourself. This is private discipline. No one else needs to know. You regulate because it protects structure. Structure cannot function when emotion is in command. Think of regulation as a gate. Emotion approaches the gate. You do not block it. You slow it. Only regulated emotion is allowed through. This preserves clarity. Clarity allows correct response. Response is different from reaction. Reaction is immediate and emotional. Response is delayed and deliberate. Response reflects structure. That's the key. Structure cannot speak through chaos. Many people fear that pausing will make them look weak, or unprepared, or passive. The opposite happens. Calm pauses signal control. They unsettle unstable people. They de-escalate tension. You do not need to win every moment. You need to maintain position. Position is maintained through regulation. This chapter is not about silence forever. It is about sequence. Regulate first. Respond second. Never reverse this order. If you respond first, regulation becomes damage control. Damage control is expensive. Prevention is efficient. You also regulate internally before internal responses. Thoughts surge just like emotion. Judgments appear. Stories form. You pause there too. You do not believe the first thought. You do not act on the first interpretation. You regulate attention. This slows thinking. Slower thinking is more accurate. Accuracy matters more than speed. Especially under pressure. You have a choice. You can keep letting moments control you. Or you can install regulation as your default. Default behaviors shape identity. Identity shapes outcomes. A regulated person is predictable to themselves. They trust their reactions. They trust their timing. This trust reduces anxiety. Anxiety comes from unpredictability, not from difficulty. Regulation creates predictability. Predictability stabilizes confidence. You stop bracing for mistakes. You stop replaying conversations. You stop fearing escalation. Because you know the process. Pause. Regulate. Respond. This is the sequence of the armored mind. Without it, armor cracks under emotional impact. With it, impact is absorbed and neutralized. You learned how to stop absorbing everything. You learned how to build internal structure. Now you know how to activate that structure in real time. Before words. Before action. Before reaction. Next, you must remove what consistently undermines regulation. External noise. Noise weakens the mind. Not dramatically. Gradually. Constant input softens internal edges. It keeps the system alert. It prevents recovery. Most people live inside this noise all day. Music playing. Videos running. Messages arriving. Background commentary everywhere. They believe it helps them function. It does the opposite. Weak inputs create weak regulation. That's the key. What you allow around you shapes how you operate inside. You have a choice. You can continue surrounding yourself with constant stimulation. Or you can begin removing what undermines control. Silencing inputs is not about isolation. It is about precision. Not everything deserves access to your nervous system. Noise trains reactivity. It keeps attention shallow. It shortens patience. When inputs are constant, the mind never settles. When the mind never settles, regulation becomes difficult. When regulation fails, structure collapses. This is why emotional control feels harder in loud environments. The system is already taxed. Stillness repairs this. Stillness is not empty. It is corrective. When external noise drops, internal signals become clear. Fatigue. Tension. Emotion. These signals guide regulation. Noise hides them. Most people avoid silence because it feels uncomfortable. Thoughts surface. Feelings rise. They assume this means something is wrong. It does not. It means the system is finally audible. You don't need their permission to reduce input. You do not owe constant engagement. You do not need to justify quiet. Silence is a boundary. Boundaries protect structure. Structure protects control. This is not about becoming passive. It is about becoming deliberate. Stillness gives you leverage. In silence, impulses become visible. The urge to check. The urge to distract. The urge to escape. You see them clearly. Seeing is control. When noise is present, impulses blend in. They move you before you notice. That's the key. Silence exposes weakness so it can be trained. You are not trying to eliminate stimulation forever. You are learning to tolerate its absence. Tolerance of silence equals tolerance of pressure. Pressure feels louder when the mind is used to noise. This is why people panic in quiet moments. They have trained dependence on stimulation. Dependence is vulnerability. You correct this through practice. You remove background noise during work. You walk without audio. You sit without input. At first, the mind resists. It searches for stimulation. It feels restless. This is not boredom. It is withdrawal from noise. You stay. Staying builds capacity. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. Discipline holds when comfort disappears. Most people believe they need constant input to stay focused. That belief is false. Noise fragments focus. Silence consolidates it. Silence allows attention to deepen. Deep attention strengthens regulation. Regulation strengthens structure. Everything connects. You have a choice. You can keep feeding the mind constant input. Or you can let it rest and reorganize. Rest is not inactivity. It is recovery. Recovery restores baseline control. When baseline control is higher, emotional spikes are smaller. Reactivity drops. Decision-making improves. This is measurable. You respond slower. But better. You think less. but more clearly. That's the key. Quality replaces volume. Silencing weakening inputs also means reducing informational noise. Endless updates. Breaking news. Opinion cycles. Most of it changes nothing. It only agitates. Agitation feels like awareness. It is not. Awareness requires clarity. Clarity requires quiet. You do not need to know everything. You need to think well about what matters. Information without integration creates confusion. Silence allows integration. This is why deliberate thinkers protect quiet time. Not to escape the world. To engage it accurately. You don't need their permission to disengage temporarily. You do not need approval to disconnect. You are allowed to protect your internal state. Your internal state determines your effectiveness. Weak inputs weaken effectiveness. Silencing them is strategic. This includes people. Not everyone needs access to you at all times. Not every conversation is worth entering. Not every emotional exchange is necessary. You reduce exposure calmly. No explanation. No conflict. Just distance. Distance restores perspective. Perspective supports control. Stillness also retrains attention. Without constant stimulation, attention learns to stay. To hold. To settle. This is foundational for focus. You cannot harden focus in a noisy environment. Noise keeps attention shallow. Silence deepens it. That's the key. Depth requires quiet. You will notice something else. When inputs reduce, time feels slower. Moments stretch. Urgency decreases. This is not inefficiency. It is accuracy. Urgency is often manufactured by noise. Remove the noise. Urgency fades. What remains is what matters. This simplifies decision-making. Simplicity strengthens discipline. Silencing inputs also improves sleep. Improves recovery. Improves emotional baseline. These effects compound. You feel steadier without trying harder. This is efficiency through reduction. Most people try to add strategies. Add tools. Add stimulation. They should subtract. Subtraction reveals structure. Structure holds. You have a choice. You can continue flooding the system. Or you can lower the volume intentionally. Lower volume increases signal. Signal guides action. Action becomes deliberate. This chapter is about environment. Not external circumstances. Internal conditions. You shape internal conditions by controlling inputs. When inputs weaken, discipline strengthens. When discipline strengthens, the armored mind forms. You are not becoming less responsive. You are becoming less reactive. There is a difference. Responsiveness is chosen. Reactivity is automatic. Silence creates the space where choice exists. That space is power. You learned how to stop absorbing everything. You learned how to build internal structure. You learned how to regulate before responding. Now you understand how noise undermines all of it. Next, you must learn how to use discipline to strengthen focus deliberately. Not briefly. Not emotionally. Consistently. Focus does not harden by accident. It hardens through discipline. Most people treat focus as a feeling. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel motivated. They wait for the right mood. That is why their focus stays soft. Soft focus breaks under pressure. Discipline is what hardens it. That's the key. Focus is not found. It is forged. You have a choice. You can continue relying on fluctuating energy. Or you can train focus regardless of how you feel. Training begins with constraint. One task. One direction. One block of time. Anything more weakens attention. The mind wants options. Options feel safe. Options feel flexible. Options destroy depth. Depth is where focus strengthens. When you remove options, the mind resists. It searches for escape. It looks for stimulation. This resistance is expected. It is not a sign to stop. It is proof that training has started. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. Discipline stays when comfort disappears. Most people mistake restlessness for inability. They think focus is not for them. That belief is false. Restlessness is withdrawal from distraction. You do not cure withdrawal by giving in. You stay. You sit with the task. You hold attention. You refuse to switch. At first, attention feels unstable. It drifts. It pulls away. You bring it back. Again. And again. That's the key. Returning is the training. Perfect focus is not required. Consistent return is. Each return strengthens control. Most people quit too early. They leave at the first sign of discomfort. Discomfort is the entry price. If you pay it, focus deepens. If you avoid it, focus stays shallow. You don't need their permission to work without interruption. You do not need approval to be unavailable. You do not need to explain why you are focused. Focus requires defense. Interruptions are not neutral. They fracture momentum. Momentum takes time to rebuild. This is why discipline must include environment. Notifications off. Devices away. Inputs controlled. This is not extreme. It is necessary. You cannot harden focus while constantly reopening attention. Every switch softens it again. Multitasking is focus erosion. People call it efficiency. It is not. It is controlled fragmentation. Fragmentation weakens mental endurance. Endurance is built by staying. You stay with difficulty. You stay with boredom. You stay with resistance. Staying teaches the mind a new rule. Escape is not rewarded. Over time, resistance fades faster. Attention settles sooner. Depth becomes familiar. This is conditioning reversed. You are retraining attention to hold. That's the key. What you repeatedly do becomes default. Discipline makes focus predictable. Predictable focus is power. Unpredictable focus creates anxiety. Anxiety comes from not trusting your attention. When you know you can hold focus, pressure loses leverage. You stop rushing. You stop panicking. You stop scattering energy. This is why disciplined focus supports emotional control. Emotion spikes less when attention is stable. Stability reduces internal noise. Stillness supports this process. When you train focus in quiet conditions, it holds under stress. Noise undermines discipline. Silence reinforces it. This is not about isolating yourself. It is about training in controlled conditions. Athletes do this. Professionals do this. Operators do this. They do not rely on mood. They rely on structure. Structure tells you when to focus. For how long? On what? Structure removes negotiation. Negotiation weakens discipline. You have a choice. You can negotiate with yourself every day. Or you can follow a rule. Rules conserve energy. For example, when focus time starts, you do not check anything. You do not switch tasks. You do not leave unless necessary. When focus time ends, you disengage fully. Clear start. Clear end. This containment protects endurance. Endurance allows longer focus later. You build capacity gradually. Short sessions first. Fully protected. Fully committed. You stop before collapse. Collapse teaches avoidance. Completion teaches confidence. Confidence reinforces discipline. That's the key. Discipline creates trust in yourself. Most people distrust their ability to focus. So they avoid deep work. Avoidance confirms the belief. You break this cycle through training. Each completed session proves capability. Capability stabilizes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who can stay. Staying is rare. Staying is powerful. Most people leave early. They distract. They switch. You stay. This alone creates separation. Focus hardens because it is no longer optional. Optional focus disappears under pressure. Enforced focus holds. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. Intensity spikes and fades. Consistency compounds. Daily discipline builds quiet strength. Quiet strength lasts. You will notice changes. Tasks feel less overwhelming. Time feels more structured. Mental fatigue decreases. Not because work is easier. Because attention is stronger. Strong attention carries weight. It absorbs complexity without collapsing. This is what an armored mind requires. Without hardened focus, armor cracks. Emotion leaks in. Noise penetrates. Structure weakens. With hardened focus, the system holds. You have a choice. You can keep letting focus depend on feeling. Or you can train it to obey structure. One leads to inconsistency. The other leads to control. Control is the objective. Not productivity. Not speed. Control. This chapter is about deliberate strain. Strain applied correctly strengthens. Strain avoided creates weakness. You apply strain through staying. Staying with one task. Staying without stimulation. Staying through resistance. This is how focus hardens. You learned how to silence weakening inputs. Now you know how to strengthen attention deliberately. Next, you must learn how to protect this focus from subtle loss. Small leaks. Hidden drains. Emotion hits before thought. Impact arrives fast. The body reacts. The mind follows. Most people confuse impact with command. They feel something. They move immediately. That pattern weakens control. Emotional impact is unavoidable. Emotional obedience is optional. That's the key. You do not control what you feel first. You control what you do next. You have a choice. You can let emotion carry weight. Or you can let it pass without influence. Detachment is how armor forms. Detachment does not mean numbness. It means separation. You feel the emotion. You do not merge with it. Most people merge instantly. They identify with the feeling. They act as if it defines reality. It does not. Emotion is a signal, not a verdict. When you treat emotion as truth, behavior distorts. Anger narrows vision. Fear accelerates urgency. Excitement removes restraint. Each one pulls action forward. Detachment restores distance. Distance restores judgment. Stillness is the tool. When impact hits, you pause. You do not react. You observe. Observation slows the system. That pause is not weakness. It is authority. You don't need their permission to pause internally. You do not owe immediate expression. You do not need to explain your restraint. Most emotional damage happens because people rush to discharge feeling. They want relief. They want release. Relief feels good. Then consequences arrive. Detachment trades relief for control. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Discipline holds position when emotion tries to move you. You feel the surge. You name it. Anger. Fear. Frustration. Naming creates space. Space breaks fusion. Fusion is when emotion and identity collapse into one. When fused, emotion decides. Detachment prevents fusion. You are not the feeling. You are the observer of it. This changes behavior immediately. When you observe emotion, intensity drops. The body settles. The urge weakens. This is physiological, not motivational. Emotion peaks quickly when not fed. Then it fades. Reaction feeds emotion. Stillness starves it. That's the key. What you do in the first seconds matters most. Practice starts with low stakes. Minor irritation. Delays. Small disappointments. These moments are training. You feel impact. You pause. You do nothing. Not forever. Just long enough for clarity to return. At first, this feels uncomfortable. The body demands action. The mind searches for justification. You do not comply. Each time you hold still, you build tolerance. Tolerance is strength. Over time, emotional impact feels lighter. Not because you feel less. Because you are less moved. This is control. Most people think control means suppression. They try to push emotion down. That fails. Suppression creates tension. Tension leaks. Detachment is different. You allow emotion to exist. You refuse to let it steer. This preserves energy. Energy wasted on reaction is unrecoverable. Energy. Preserved compounds. You have a choice. You can let every impact shape your state. Or you can let impact pass through without effect. Passing through does not mean ignoring reality. It means processing without distortion. Distortion comes from immediacy. Immediate action feels decisive. It is often inaccurate. Accuracy requires distance. Distance requires pause. Stillness is the skill that creates both. You do not rush to speak. You do not rush to decide. You do not rush to correct. You wait. Waiting is active. It allows structure to engage. It allows focus to hold. It allows discipline to lead. This is how armored minds operate. They absorb impact without breaking form. Impact tests structure. Without detachment, structure collapses. With detachment, structure holds. You will notice a shift. You stop escalating situations. You stop regretting words. You stop replaying moments. Because fewer mistakes are made. Mistakes come from acting while fused. Detachment breaks fusion. You don't need their permission to stay composed under emotional pressure. You do not need validation to remain calm. You do not need approval to hold silence. Silence protects you. Not socially. Strategically. Emotion wants expression. Discipline chooses timing. Timing is power. When you respond later, response improves. When you respond calmer, outcomes improve. This builds credibility. With others. With yourself. You begin to trust your reactions because they are no longer reactions. They are responses. Response implies choice. Choice implies control. This chapter is about resilience. Not endurance. Not toughness. Stability. Stability under emotional impact is rare. It is trained. It is built through repetition. Every pause strengthens it. Every restraint reinforces it. You become harder to move. Not emotionally closed. Structurally solid. This is what armor does. It absorbs force. It prevents penetration. You learned how to harden focus through discipline. Now you have learned how to protect it from emotional impact. Next, you must learn how to hold this control when pressure compounds. When stakes rise. When urgency increases. That is where armor is tested. Pressure changes behavior. Not because it creates weakness. Because it exposes habits. When stakes rise, people reveal how they operate. Do they rush? Do they tighten? Do they scatter? Most lose form under pressure. That loss is not accidental. It is untrained response. Pressure compresses time. It amplifies urgency. It narrows perception. If your system is not prepared, control collapses. That's the key. Pressure does not demand speed. It demands structure. You have a choice. You can let pressure dictate your behavior. Or you can hold form deliberately. Form is how you operate regardless of conditions. When form breaks, emotion leads. When form holds, discipline leads. Most people think pressure requires immediate action. They believe hesitation is failure. That belief creates mistakes. Speed without stability is noise. Stillness under pressure is not passive. It is strategic. It creates space where others feel trapped. When pressure hits, the first instinct is to do something. Anything. That instinct must be restrained. You pause. Not to delay. To stabilize. Stabilization comes first. Action comes second. This sequence matters. Under pressure, the body reacts before the mind. Breathing shortens. Muscles tighten. Vision narrows. If you act here, you act blindly. You regulate first. Slow the breath. Set posture. Ground attention. This takes seconds. Those seconds change outcomes. That's the key. Seconds of regulation prevent hours of correction. You don't need their permission to slow down under pressure. You do not owe urgency compliance. You are allowed to pause. Pausing under pressure feels unnatural. That is why it works. Others escalate. You stabilize. Stability creates advantage. Holding form means your internal rules remain intact. You do not abandon structure because stakes increase. You rely on it more. Structure exists for pressure, not comfort. Most people build habits for calm conditions only. They fall apart when pressure arrives. You train for pressure by practicing calm restraint. Stillness in low stakes builds stillness in high stakes. Pressure tests attention. Attention wants to scatter. Multiple threats. Multiple demands. You counter this by narrowing focus. One priority. One action. One step. You do not solve everything at once. You stabilize first. Stability precedes accuracy. Accuracy precedes speed. That order cannot be reversed. It's not about courage. It's about discipline. Courage without discipline becomes recklessness. Discipline holds when emotion spikes. Under pressure, emotion demands expression. Fear wants escape. Anger wants confrontation. You detach. You observe emotion without obeying it. Detachment keeps form intact. Form is posture. Breathing. Attention. Sequence. Sequence matters. Most pressure mistakes happen because people reverse sequence. They act. Then think. Then regret. You reverse that. You think. Then act. Then move forward cleanly. This requires trust in process. Trust is built through repetition. You have a choice. You can keep improvising under pressure. Or you can rely on trained structure. Improvisation drains energy. Structure conserves it. Pressure also tests commitment. When stakes rise, shortcuts appear attractive. Excuses feel justified. Standards feel negotiable. This is where most discipline fails. You do not negotiate under pressure. Standards are enforced most strictly when it is hardest. That's the key. Standards protect you when emotion tries to take over. Stillness is the anchor. Stillness does not mean inaction. It means control before movement. Think of stillness as containment. It contains emotion. It contains urgency. It contains impulse. Contained systems do not explode. Uncontained systems do. Pressure compounds over time. Deadlines stack. Consequences increase. Fatigue sets in. This is when old habits try to return. Checking. Complaining. Reacting. You catch this early. Early correction is calm. Late correction is forceful. You correct early. You return to breath. You return to posture. You return to the next correct action. You ignore everything else. That's the key. Pressure is reduced by narrowing scope. Most overwhelm comes from thinking too wide. Too far ahead. Too many variables. You reduce. What is the next correct action? Nothing else matters. This keeps form intact. Holding form under pressure also requires recovery. Pressure without recovery erodes discipline. You do not push endlessly. You step out deliberately. You disengage fully when allowed. This prevents burnout. Burnout breaks armor. Armor must be maintained. Stillness is part of maintenance. Quiet moments recalibrate the system. They restore baseline control. This makes the next pressure cycle manageable. You don't need their permission to protect recovery. You do not need approval to rest strategically. Rest is not weakness. Rest is preparation. Preparation allows form to hold longer. You will notice changes. Pressure feels less threatening. Urgency feels less convincing. Decisions feel clearer. Not because pressure is gone. Because you are stable inside it. This creates confidence. Not loud confidence. Quiet confidence. Confidence that comes from predictability. You know how you will act under pressure. You trust your sequence. Pause. Stabilize. Act. This trust removes fear. Fear comes from unpredictability. Not from difficulty. Holding form under pressure makes you predictable to yourself. This is power. Others may rush. Others may panic. Others may escalate. You do not. You hold. Holding is not passive. It is dominant. Dominance through control. This chapter is about resilience. Not emotional toughness. Structural integrity. Structural integrity keeps the armored mind intact. Pressure is unavoidable. Loss of form is optional. You have a choice. You can let pressure bend you. Or you can let it reveal your structure. One leads to collapse. The other leads to authority. You learned how to detach from emotional impact. Now you know how to hold form. When pressure compounds. Next, you must remove the small failures that quietly weaken armor over time. The leaks. Most breakdowns do not happen suddenly. They happen slowly. Through small leaks. Through ignored weaknesses. Mental armor rarely shatters. It erodes. That's the key. What you fail to seal will drain you over time. You have a choice. You can keep losing control in small ways. Or you can identify and seal the weak points. Weak points are not dramatic. They look insignificant. They feel harmless. Unfinished tasks. Unresolved thoughts. Minor distractions. Habitual checking. Each one leaks attention. Attention leakage weakens focus. Weak focus weakens regulation. Regulation failure exposes structure. This is how discipline collapses quietly. Most people try to fix big problems first. They ignore small ones. That approach fails. Small failures repeat more often. Frequency matters more than intensity. You must seal the small leaks first. Mental weak points usually come from three places: unclosed loops, uncontrolled switching, unexamined habits. Unclosed loops are unfinished business. Tasks you started but did not complete. Decisions you postponed without capture. Problems you keep revisiting mentally. The mind does not forget open loops. It keeps them active in the background. Background activity drains energy. You feel it as restlessness, as vague pressure, as mental fatigue. The solution is not thinking harder. It is closure. You either complete the task, or you capture it clearly. Writing closes loops. When something is written down with a clear next action, the mind releases it. That's the key. What is captured stops leaking. You don't need their permission to slow down and finish things properly. You do not need approval to complete before starting something new. Completion is armor. Switching is another major leak. Each time you switch tasks, attention fragments. Fragmentation leaves residue. Residue clouds thinking. People call switching flexibility. It is instability. You are not designed to hold multiple focal points simultaneously. You are designed to move sequentially. One thing at a time. This is not limitation. It is efficiency. Efficiency preserves energy. Energy preserved strengthens control. You seal this leak by enforcing sequence. You do not jump between tasks. You do not check mid-focus. You finish, then move. At first, this feels slow. It is not. Switching costs more time than staying. Staying builds momentum. Momentum is protective. You don't need their permission to work sequentially. You are allowed to finish. Another weak point is habitual checking. Checking is not curiosity. It is anxiety management. You check to relieve uncertainty. You check to feel updated. You check to avoid discomfort. Each check reinforces dependence. Dependence weakens autonomy. Autonomy is armor. You break this habit by limiting access. Scheduled checks. Defined windows. No random entry. This removes temptation. It's not about willpower. It's about discipline. Discipline changes structure so resistance is unnecessary. That's the key. Remove the trigger. Do not fight the urge. Mental weak points also exist internally. Replaying conversations. Imagining outcomes. Rehearsing arguments. These loops feel productive. They are not. They drain attention continuously. You seal this by naming the loop. This is replay. This is speculation. Then you disengage. You do not finish the thought. You do not seek resolution mentally. Resolution comes through action or acceptance, not rehearsal. Stillness makes these loops visible. In quiet moments, you notice where attention leaks. You do not judge. You correct. Correction is calm. Most people criticize themselves for leaks. That adds another leak. Self-criticism drains energy. Correction preserves it. You identify the weak point. You adjust behavior. You move on. This is discipline. You have a choice.
You can ignore small leaks and keep feeling drained.
Or you can seal them and regain capacity. Sealing leaks feels subtle.
The effect compounds.
Focus lasts longer. Pressure feels lighter. Decisions sharpen. Not because you added anything. Because you stopped losing energy. This chapter is about maintenance. Armor is not built once.
It is maintained daily.
Weak points appear over time. You address them early. Early correction is easy. Late correction is expensive. Stillness helps you notice early.
When the mind is quiet, leaks are obvious. When the mind is noisy, leaks hide.
This is why silence remains essential. Silence reveals loss.
Loss corrected becomes strength.
You do not need perfection. You need consistency. You will leak sometimes. That is normal. The discipline is noticing quickly and sealing. Again. And again. This repetition builds awareness. Awareness prevents accumulation. Accumulation leads to collapse. You prevent collapse by sealing.
Mental weak points are not flaws.
They are signals. Signals showing where structure needs reinforcement. You respond with adjustment. Not emotion. That's the key.
Armor is maintained, not dramatized. When leaks are sealed, pressure has less effect.
Emotion has less leverage. Focus holds longer. The system stabilizes. You feel less rushed. Less scattered. More grounded. Not because life changed. Because loss stopped. You learned how to hold form under pressure. Now you know how to prevent slow erosion. Next, you must make this level of control automatic. So discipline does not depend on effort.
So structure runs without negotiation.
Control should not require effort. If it does, it will fail when you are tired. When pressure rises. When emotion spikes. That's the key. Effort fades. Systems hold. Most people rely on willpower. They try to decide correctly in the moment. They try to be strong when it matters. That approach breaks. Control must become automatic. You have a choice. You can keep relying on effort. Or you can build systems that run without debate. Automatic control means fewer decisions. Fewer negotiations. Fewer points of failure. When behavior is automatic, emotion has less access. Emotion thrives in gaps. In uncertainty. In hesitation. Automation closes those gaps. Most mistakes happen when people pause to decide. Not because pause is bad. Because there is no rule to follow. Rules remove pause. When a rule exists, action follows structure. Not feeling. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Discipline becomes powerful when it no longer needs energy. This starts with standards. Standards are rules you do not renegotiate. They define how you operate. When attention is pulled, the standard holds. When pressure increases, the standard holds. When emotion rises, the standard holds. Without standards, everything becomes situational. Situational behavior is unstable. You don't need their permission to install standards. You do not need approval to enforce them internally. You do not need validation to follow your own rules. Standards must be simple. Complex rules break under pressure. Simple rules execute fast. For example, no response when emotionally elevated. No multitasking during focus. No random checking outside defined windows. These are not preferences. They are defaults. Defaults run automatically. Most people treat discipline as something they summon. They wait to feel disciplined. That is backward. You build discipline by reducing choice. Choice is expensive.
Every choice drains attention.
Drained attention weakens control. Automation preserves attention. Attention preserved is power. That's the key. The less you decide, the more consistent you become. Automatic control also requires environment alignment. If the environment encourages distraction, discipline must fight constantly. Fighting is inefficient. You redesign the environment. You remove triggers. You limit access. You reduce friction for correct behavior. Correct behavior should be easy. Incorrect behavior should be inconvenient. This is not self-punishment. It is strategy. You do not rely on restraint. You rely on structure. Structure outlasts emotion. You have a choice. You can keep fighting impulses daily. Or you can remove the conditions that create them. Removal is easier.
Stillness helps you identify where automation is missing. In quiet moments, you see where you hesitate,
Where you debate.
where you rationalize.
Those are points needing structure. You do not argue with yourself there. You install a rule. Rule replaces debate. Debate drains energy. Rules conserve it. Automation also applies internally. Thought patterns can be automated. You notice a familiar loop. You label it. You disengage. No analysis. No negotiation. The rule is simple. Do not follow unproductive loops. This becomes automatic with repetition. At first, you must notice deliberately. Over time, the disengagement happens faster. Eventually, it happens without effort. This is training. Most people stop too early. They expect instant automation. Automation is built through consistency. You repeat the rule until it becomes default. That's the key. Repetition installs identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who does not negotiate with impulse. Identity reinforces behavior. Behavior reinforces identity. This loop stabilizes discipline. Automatic control also protects against fatigue. When you are tired, you fall back to defaults. If defaults are weak, mistakes follow. If defaults are strong, control remains. This is why automation matters most when you feel least capable. You plan for weakness, not strength. Planning for strength is naive. Everyone is strong sometimes. Few are disciplined when depleted. Automation protects you then. You don't need their permission to design for your worst days. You do not need approval to reduce decision load. Reducing load is intelligent. Load is what breaks discipline. Most burnout is not from work. It is from constant decision making. Automation reduces this. When fewer decisions are required, energy remains. Energy remains, focus holds. Focus holds, pressure is manageable. This is how control becomes sustainable. Sustainable control is rare. Most people spike, then crash. Spikes come from effort. Stability comes from automation. You want stability. Stability creates trust. You trust yourself to behave consistently. You trust your process. You trust your reactions. This trust reduces anxiety. Anxiety comes from unpredictability. Automation creates predictability. Predictability creates calm. Calm supports accuracy. Accuracy improves outcomes. Everything connects. You have a choice. You can continue managing behavior manually. Or you can automate discipline. One requires constant energy. The other runs quietly. Quiet systems are strong systems. This chapter is about permanence. Not temporary control. Not situational discipline. Permanent structure. When control is automatic, pressure has little effect. Emotion has little leverage. Distraction has limited access. The armored mind operates this way. Not because it is stronger. Because it is structured. Structure runs even when you are tired. Even when you are stressed. Even when you are distracted. That is real control.
You learned how to seal mental weak points. Now you understand how to remove effort from discipline.
Next, you must make this way of operating your identity. Not a tool. Not a phase. A standard. An armored mind is not something you switch on. It is how you live. Most people treat control as a tool. They use it when needed. They drop it when tired. That is why control never lasts.
Armor only works when it is worn constantly.
That's the key. You do not visit discipline. You operate from it. Living from the armored mind means your default state is guarded. Not tense. Not defensive. Structured. Structure becomes identity. Identity determines behavior before thought appears.
Most people wait for situations to demand control.
By then, it is already too late.
An armored mind does not wait.
It enforces standards quietly. Continuously. Without negotiation. You have a choice. You can keep rebuilding control after every failure. Or you can make control your baseline. Baseline behavior decides your life. Not peak moments. Not rare effort. Baseline. Living from the armored mind means certain things are no longer debated. You do not react immediately. You do not absorb everything. You do not chase stimulation. You do not follow emotion blindly. These are not goals. They are rules. Rules define identity.
When rules are clear, behavior is predictable.
Predictability creates stability. Stability creates power. Most people believe power comes from intensity. From force. From effort. That belief is flawed. It's not about intensity. It's about discipline. Discipline applied consistently becomes quiet authority. Quiet authority does not announce itself. It does not explain. It does not rush. It holds. Living armored means you decide access. What enters your attention? What affects your mood? What deserves your energy? Everything else stays outside. This is not withdrawal from life. It is engagement on your terms. You don't need their permission to live this way. You do not need approval to protect your mind. You do not need validation to be selective. Most people will not understand your boundaries. That is irrelevant. Understanding is not required for control. When you live from the armored mind, urgency loses influence. Deadlines exist. Pressure exists. But panic does not. You act without escalation. You move without haste. You decide without distortion. This changes outcomes. Not because you are smarter. Because you are stable. Stability sharpens perception. You see what others miss. You hear what others overlook. You act when others freeze or rush. This is advantage. Living armored also means accepting responsibility. No blaming emotion. No blaming circumstances. No blaming people. Responsibility returns authority to you. When you own your internal state, nothing external can hijack it. That's the key. Ownership is armor. Most people outsource ownership. They let mood decide behavior. They let environment decide focus. They let pressure decide pace. You do not. You decide. This does not mean you control everything. It means you control yourself. Self-control is the only reliable leverage. Everything else is unstable.
Living from the armored mind also means maintenance.
Armor degrades if ignored.
You maintain it through routine.
Daily silence. Daily focus. Daily restraint. Not extreme. Consistent. Consistency beats intensity. You do not wait to feel off before correcting. You correct early. Early correction is calm. Late correction is force. You choose calm. Stillness remains central. Not as rest. As calibration. Stillness recalibrates attention. It reveals leaks. It restores baseline. Without stillness, armor dulls. With it, armor strengthens. You protect stillness deliberately. You create space without input. Without reaction. Without urgency. This is where alignment happens. Alignment between rules and behavior.
When alignment is strong, confidence stabilizes.
Not loud confidence. Quiet certainty. Certainty that you will not betray your standards. Certainty that you will not lose control under pressure. Certainty that you will act deliberately.
This certainty changes how you carry yourself.
You speak less. You move slower. You decide cleaner. People feel this. They may not understand it. But they respect it.
Living armored does not mean isolation.
It means selective engagement. You choose conversations carefully. You choose commitments deliberately. You choose focus intentionally. This reduces noise. Reduced noise increases signal. Signal guides action. Action becomes effective. Effectiveness reduces effort. This is efficiency at the deepest level. You are no longer fighting yourself. Internal conflict fades when rules are clear. Clear rules eliminate inner debate. Debate drains energy.
Energy conserved becomes available for what matters.
Most people waste energy managing reactions. Managing emotions. Managing regret. You do not. You act cleanly. Clean action produces clean results.
Even when outcomes are difficult, there is no internal chaos.
Chaos is the real cost. Living from the armored mind removes chaos. Not from the world. From you. You have a choice. You can treat this way of operating as temporary.
Or you can make it permanent.
Temporary discipline collapses. Permanent structure holds. Make it permanent. Do not wait for stress to remind you. Do not wait for mistakes to teach you. Enforce standards now.
Refuse what weakens you.
Protect what stabilizes you. Practice what holds under pressure. This is not self-improvement. It is self-governance. Self-governance is power. No one can give it to you. No one can take it if you enforce it. You built the system throughout this book. You learned how to stop absorbing everything. You built internal structure. You learned to regulate before responding. You silenced weakening inputs. You hardened focus through discipline. You detached from emotional impact. You held form under pressure. You sealed mental weak points. You made control automatic. Now you live from it. Not occasionally. Not when convenient. Always. This is the armored mind. Maintain it. Enforce it. Operate from it. No explanation. No compromise. That is the standard.
An armored mind is not closed.
It is selective. It does not resist pressure. It neutralizes it. You do not need more strength. You need more structure. Structure holds when emotion rises. Structure holds when attention is pulled. Structure holds when pressure is applied. Armor is built through discipline. Through stillness. Through refusal. You decide what enters. You decide what stays. You decide what moves you. From this point forward, operate differently. Do not absorb. Do not rush. Do not react. Hold form. Maintain structure. Enforce control. Build the armored mind.